There are presidents that have done things that have gone beyond the law, and part of what they do is they try to stretch the law. And the question is how the American citizenry is supposed to think about that.
Yeah, so every president tries to expand their presidential power and gets knocked back by the Supreme Court or by the Congress. What's different about this is that this isn't even close. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I can read the first line of the 14th Amendment and tell that the president's birthright citizenship is contrary to the Constitution. And the other thing that's different is traditionally presidents have said, OK, Supreme Court said what I did is unconstitutional. Yes, sir, I abide by that ruling. What we're hearing from the MAGA people, the Trump people, is that, you know, who are these courts anyway? That gets you into kind of constitutional crisis land if they ignore rulings of the court, if they slag the courts in a way that further erodes their confidence. I think that's the big difference.
When it comes to the remaining cabinet proposals, are there people you have concerns about, not concerns about? You think they all sail through? What do you think happens?
Yeah, sure. I mean, by and large, you know, ironically, for a populist president who's standing up for the common man, he has populated his economic team with Wall Street guys, Bessent, et cetera. Now, these are guys who at least know what they're doing, right? You may disagree with them politically, but they know what they're doing. I actually think the economy is in relatively good hands with those guys.
Can I just ask you, because you just said something, you know, they know what they're doing. Do you think the Democrats and the Biden administration made a mistake in the last term by having people who were not part of the private sector? Is that something you think
they didn't have enough
legitimate
people.
Critique?
Yeah, they didn't have enough. Look, I think a good administration will typically have people who are very comfortable and knowledgeable about the private sector. I was in the private sector for 12 years, right? That's a huge advantage for me as I think about regulation in the financial world. So, yeah, I think the right thing is a mix, and I think it's fair to say that the Biden administration was dismissive of people with private sector experience. So, again, you asked about the nominees.
Right.
On the one hand, you know, Jay Clayton as, Southern District of New York Attorney General, that's probably the best appointment you can make. I'm very happy with the CIA director who I spoke with yesterday. We're former colleagues. On the other end of the spectrum, and, you know, I suppose we could have an argument about this, but there is no argument. Kash Patel at FBI. Here's a guy who has promised to use the tools of the federal police force to prosecute political opponents, no law enforcement experience. So there's a spectrum of people who I think are qualified and good.
Where do you land on RFK, which is, of course, the grilling starts today in the Senate?
Yeah, look, I don't know RFK. Healthcare is not my field. There is nothing about this nomination, a guy who's sort of promoted obviously rebutted concerns about autism coming out of vaccines. There's nothing about this guy that feels like he has the prudence and care and experience, but, not my field. The interesting question is, how does the Senate react? This country has always been about checks and balances and a balance of power. If guys like Kash Patel and Robert Kennedy just sail through, what you know is that the Senate is a wholly owned subsidiary of Donald Trump, and that's a weird world to be in.
You mentioned financial regulation, and I know this is your forte as well as a former Goldman Sachs executive. There has been this notion that under the Trump 2.0, we'll see these sweeping deregulatory actions take place, namely as it pertains to capital rules, as it pertains to the ability for some of their customers to transact through antitrust. What do you see transpiring? Do you feel like in the halls of Congress there is a will to have this deregulatory regime that so many people in the market are expecting?
Yeah, interesting question. On financial regulation, that's a tough question. There's always a pendulum, right? There's always a deregulatory moment, as there was, say, in 2002, 2003, followed by a 2007, 2008 major meltdown because people realize, holy smokes, the regulation wasn't what we need. So that pendulum swings. What's interesting about right now, Democrats speaking here, is that we are realizing on my side of the aisle that the regulation that prevents bridges from being built rapidly, that prevents the electrical network, which we need to triple in size, that the regulations that over the decades, whether they're environmental, being respectful of historical, stuff, being respectful of Native American kind of stuff, that all of these things together have resulted in a government that can no longer build anything, or if they do it over 20 and 30 years. That has implications for things that we care about, like actually building out an electrical economy, building out the grid, and it has fundamental implications for people who say, you know what, government can do some good stuff for you, right? We can build the interstate highway system. Today, it's almost hard for government to deliver. So guys like me get excited about the possibility of permitting reform and what that might mean for building stuff that actually makes people's lives better.
I have two quick questions. I know we're going to run out of time. TikTok, do you have a view? I mean, I think, by the way, companies right now don't know what to do. So Apple and Google say, I can't keep it on the phone because they're scared They say the law is the law, and Tom Cotton's out there saying if you do this, we're coming after you, meaning if you keep it on the phone, we'll keep it. But Oracle and Akamai are still operating this because the president has said, disregard the law, folks. Actually, I have 75 days to make a deal, and I'm going to. Therefore, you're protected. Are they protected? What should they be doing?
Yeah, look, it's chaos. It's chaos. And start with where I am. I voted against banning TikTok. I'm the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee. I know exactly what the Chinese are doing and can doing. But it was inconceivable to me that the federal government, maybe for the first time in our history, would tell millions of Americans, you don't get to see this media platform.
But
so
you voted against it. You voted against
the ban. Exactly.
So you did not think the ban was right?
I did not think the ban was consistent with freedom of the press and the idea that citizens should have access to the information that they want.
Which also suggests to me that you do not think that TikTok is being used, at least in this moment, by the CCP in untoward ways.
It's not.
It's
Full
not.
Stop. It's
Full
not.
stop.
It's not. By the way, the government admits this in their argument to the Supreme Court. They say it's a potential threat.
Right.
And they're not wrong about that. But my view is that if the federal government is going to tell American citizens, you don't get to read this, it better not be a potential threat. It better be a clear and present danger, a real threat.
I've been making this argument, by the way, for months. I get killed by the audience, but I'm so. But you actually know. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I know it is a potential threat, but there is
not
no
one
example.
immediate.
There is no example of the CCP going to TikTok saying, "Give us this information," or going to TikTok and saying, "Hey, show Jim Himes in Connecticut this image." Doesn't happen. Could happen.
Save
doesn't
the
happen.
tape, folks. Jim Himes.